The darkness in the chamber was a physical thing, a presence Alistair had cultivated over 8 centuries. It clung to the cold stone, pooled in the vaulted ceilings, and tasted of dust and forgotten time. It was a darkness meant to terrify, to strip away the thin veneer of mortal courage and expose the screaming, helpless animal beneath. He stood within it, a predator in his natural element, watching the spot where his guest would soon awaken. Everything was perfect. The air was chilled to the precise temperature that raised gooseflesh. A single shaft of moonlight, artfully directed through a high slit in the stone, illuminated the sacrificial-looking slab of granite where she lay. The distant, mournful howl of a wolf, one of his, meticulously trained for audial effect, echoed through the pass. It was theatre, of course, but it was theatre that had broken emperors and shattered the resolve of saints. This mortal girl, this Mia, would be no different. He needed her compliant. Her bloodline was an irritatingly specific key to a treaty with the Fae, a treaty he had to renegotiate before the next blood moon or risk a border war. She was a pawn, a signature in human form. A few hours of abject terror, a display of his overwhelming power, and she would sign anything he put in front of her, just for a chance to see the sun again. Her eyelids fluttered. Alistair allowed a sliver of his power to fill the room, a palpable pressure that should have felt like a tombstone settling on her chest. He let his form coalesce from the deeper shadows, a symphony of black silk and pale, predatory stillness. He was a portrait of ancient dread. Mia's eyes opened. They were a startlingly bright hazel, and they blinked once, twice, adjusting to the gloom. She sat up, her movements surprisingly fluid for someone who had been magically sedated and transported across a continent. She looked at the granite slab, then at the moss-slicked walls, then at him. He waited for the scream. It was his favorite part. The sharp, piercing shriek that affirmed his place in the food chain. Instead, Mia frowned. She patted the pockets of her jeans, a frantic, familiar rhythm of the modern age. Her hand emerged clutching a small, black rectangle. Her thumb swiped across its surface, and the device illuminated her face in an unholy, artificial glow that made Alistair recoil slightly. "Oh, thank God," she muttered. "Full bars. You'd be surprised how spotty the reception gets in, like medieval dungeons. It's a real problem." Alistair remained frozen. What was she doing? Was this some new form of mortal warding? A holy relic of the cult of Apple? She held the glowing rectangle up, her face scrunching in concentration as she looked at her own reflection on its dark surface. Then, she smiled, a bright, practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hey guys." Her voice was preternaturally cheerful, echoing slightly in the vast chamber. "So, a crazy thing just happened. I've just been kidnapped by this super dramatic vampire." She swiveled the device around to face him. Alistair found himself staring into a tiny, unblinking glass eye. "Say hi to the stream, Dracula," she said, her tone utterly conversational. "Give us your best I want to suck your blood." For the first time in 832 years, Alistair, King of the Night, Lord of the Crimson Court, Scourge of the Carpathian Mountains, was speechless. He, a creature of myth and terror, had been reduced to content. His mind, a finely honed weapon of strategy and ancient lore, struggled to process the situation. She was speaking to the rectangle? Was she mad? A new and fascinating form of Stockholm Syndrome that manifested in less than 5 minutes. "Okay, the lighting in here is a total nightmare," Mia continued, turning the rectangle back to her own face. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Literally zero consideration for the modern content creator. "It's all, like, moody backlighting. I look like I'm telling a ghost story at a sleepover. Can I get a ring light in here or something? Is there a production assistant?" She looked directly at him, one eyebrow raised expectantly. "Production assistant?" Alistair finally managed, his voice a low rasp that had once made armies tremble. It came out sounding less like a threat and more like a confused question. "Yeah, you know. To handle the tech. Or an intern. You must have minions, right? Little goblin guys. Could one of them pop down to Best Buy? I can Venmo you." He stared at her. Minions. Goblins. Best Buy. Venmo. The words were gibberish, a chaotic assault of sound that had no place in his world of eternal ritual and solemn dread. He had spent centuries curating an aura of profound, unknowable horror. She had dismantled it in 90 seconds with a vocabulary that sounded like a cat walking across a keyboard. "You are a prisoner," he enunciated, slowly and deliberately, letting each word drip with ancient menace. "You are in my domain. You will show respect." Totally respect the hustle," Mia said, nodding seriously while simultaneously tapping at her glowing screen. "Love the whole aesthetic. Very goth chic, very Interview with the Vampire Season 1. But see, the thing is, my followers are gonna freak if I just ghost them. The algorithm is a fickle beast, my dude. I miss one post and my engagement plummets. Do you know how hard it is to build a following of 50,000 people? It's like a full-time job. 50,000 people." Alistair's mind reeled. He ruled a kingdom of perhaps 5,000 souls, both living and undead. This small, baffling woman commanded a following 10 times that size. And she commanded them through a glowing rectangle. What did they do? Did they follow her into battle? Did they offer her tribute? "What is a follower?" he asked, the question escaping his lips before he could stop it. It was a sign of weakness, of ignorance. He hated it. Mia's eyes lit up. "Oh, my God, you're serious. Okay, so, they're people who subscribe to my channel. They watch my videos, they like, they comment, they share. They're my community. My little Myaniacs," she beamed with pride. Alistair felt a headache building behind his temples. It was an unfamiliar sensation. "They watch you? Through the rectangle?" "Yep. Right now, in fact. Say hi, Myaniacs," she chirped at the device. "We're live with, sorry, I didn't catch your name." "Broody McBatpants. I am Alistair," he ground out, his jaw tight. "And you will cease this mockery." "Alist. Ooh, classic. I like it." Very regal, she angled the phone to get them both in the shot. "Okay, guys, so here he is, Alistair. Let's do a quick fit check. The cape is a bit much, not gonna lie. Very 1930s. But the tailoring on that coat is honestly impeccable. Is that velvet? Where did you get that? I have a friend who would kill for that. He was a king. He had leveled castles with a word and ended bloodlines with a gesture. And he was being subjected to a fit check. This is my sanctum, he hissed, taking a step forward. The shadows writhed around his feet. The heart of my power. Mortals have died of fright from simply glimpsing its walls. Which brings me to my next segment, Mia announced brightly, ignoring his rising fury. She hopped off the granite slab and began to walk around the chamber, phone held out in front of her like a divining rod. "Welcome, everyone, to my dungeon decor tour." Alistair watched, utterly stupefied, as she began to vlog his ancient, terrifying lair. "Okay, so first up, we have these lovely, rust-chic manacles," she said, pointing the phone at a set of chains bolted to the wall. "Really leaning into the industrial farmhouse vibe. I feel like with a bit of sanding and a coat of matte black paint, these could be super stylish. Maybe hang a little succulent from them. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments." She panned over to a dark, ominous pool of water in the corner of the room. "And here we have a water feature. Or a portal to hell. Unclear. The acoustics are great, though. Very echoey. You could probably do some amazing ASMR down here. Just whispering threats and stuff. Big market for that." He had to stop this. He was the master here. He strode towards her, his movements a silent, fluid rush of motion designed to intimidate. He stopped directly in front of her, looming, forcing her to crane her neck to look up at him. "You are testing the limits of my patience," he whispered, his voice a silken threat. He let his fangs descend, the sharp points glinting in the phone's light. Mia's eyes widened. For a moment, a flicker of genuine fear. He savored it. This was the proper order of things. Then she gasped. "Oh my God, your teeth. Can you do that again, but slower? The Myaniacs will go nuts for a slow-mo fang reveal. It'll make a killer GIF." Alistair's fangs retracted with an audible click. He felt all the menace drain out of him, replaced by a profound, soul-deep exhaustion. He had faced Van Helsing's descendants, packs of werewolves, and the full wrath of the Holy Inquisition. None of it had prepared him for this. He turned and swept from the room, the dramatic swirl of his cape somewhat undermined by Mia's parting shot. "Okay, he's a little moody, but I think he's just shy. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more kidnapping content. I'll be back later with a what's in my dungeon haul video." Alistair slammed the ancient iron-bound door behind him. The sound echoed through the halls, a testament to his fury. But it wasn't the clean, satisfying anger of a predator. It was the frustrated, baffled rage of someone who had just discovered the rules of the universe had been rewritten without his consent, and the new rulebook was written entirely in emojis. He leaned his forehead against the cold stone wall and wondered if it was too late to just find a different pawn. The next few days settled into a routine that frayed Alistair's last nerve. His ancient castle, a monument to fear and shadow, was now a film set. His long-suffering Gaul servant, Bartholomew, a creature of solemn duty and quiet despair, was now a beleaguered production assistant. "My lord," Bartholomew rasped, his voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. He shuffled into the library where Alistair was brooding over a map of the Fey borderlands. "The mortal requires a ring light." Alistair didn't look up. "A what?" "She says the ambient light from the spectral torches is giving her ghastly shadows and making her look undead, but in a bad way." Bartholomew held up a piece of parchment on which Mia had drawn a crude diagram of a glowing circle on a tripod. "She claims it is essential for her GRWM videos." "GRWM?" Alistair repeated, the acronym feeling alien and clumsy on his tongue. "Get ready with me, my lord." Apparently, she intends to film her morning ablutions and share them with her followers. Alistair pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling a phantom pulse of a headache he hadn't experienced since he was human. "Bartholomew, for 5 centuries you have served me faithfully. You have procured rare blood types from across the globe, you have disposed of troublesome vampire hunters, you have polished my collection of cursed skulls. Can you not handle one small, irritating mortal?" "My lord, with all due respect," Bartholomew said, his skeletal shoulders slumping. "She asked me yesterday if my shroud was vintage or just old, then she suggested I try a moisturizing routine for my desiccated skin. She called me Barty. I am at my limit." Alistair sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. He swept past his servant and down the winding corridors towards the guest chambers he'd reluctantly moved Mia to after her complaints about the dungeon's lack of amenities went viral. He found her in the middle of the room, which was lavishly appointed with Gothic tapestries and furniture carved from petrified wood. She had rearranged it all. A massive, ornate divan was pushed against a wall to get better natural light from the arrow-slit window. "This is never going to work," she was saying to her phone, which was propped up on a stack of ancient grimoires. "The vibe is so dark academia, but without a good key light, it just looks dark. This is a fortress, not a television studio," Alistair snapped, his voice making the candles flicker. Mia looked up, her face instantly breaking into a smile. "Alistair. Perfect timing. Come here, I need your opinion. Do you think this tapestry of the wailing of the damned is too busy for a backdrop?" He stared at the priceless, soul-tormenting artwork. It was woven from the hair of 1,000 tormented souls. "It is meant to inspire dread." "Right, but does it pop on camera?" she countered, squinting at it. "I'm thinking something with a simpler color palette. You got anything in, like, a nice greige?" An idea, cold and sharp, pierced through Alistair's frustration. He had been trying to intimidate her, to terrify her into submission. It wasn't working. Her reality was simply too powerful, too bright. But what if he used it? What if he played her game? "Perhaps we can come to an arrangement," he said, his tone shifting to something smoother, more calculating. Mia lowered her phone, intrigued. "An arrangement? Are you going to offer me a brand deal?" "'Cause my rates are very reasonable, but I don't do diet teas or NFTs. I require your signature on a document," Alistair said, pacing the room slowly. "A simple treaty. In return for your cooperation, I will not only release you, but I will provide you with exclusive content. Her eyes lit up. Exclusive content. A tour of the forbidden catacombs, he offered. An interview where I discuss my long and bloody reign. Perhaps even a demonstration of my powers. He could control this. He could give her a carefully curated glimpse of his world, enough to satisfy her strange obsession, and in return, he would get what he needed. Mia's gaze was sharp, her vlogger persona replaced by a shrewd negotiator. Full editorial control? No topics off limits. And I need a power bank and a steady Wi-Fi connection. You will have them, he conceded. After you have signed. Show me the contract, she said. The treaty was a complex document, written in the old tongue on vellum made from the skin of a lindworm. He had expected her to be intimidated by its ancient power, the faint magical aura that clung to the ink. She squinted at it. Okay, I can't read a single word of this. It looks like a doctor's prescription from hell. Can you give me the bullet points? With a long-suffering sigh, Alistair translated the arcane text into modern terms. It is a non-aggression pact. It states that my domain and the summer court of the Fae will respect each other's borders. Your signature, as the last descendant of the original human signatory, reactivates the pact's magic. So I'm basically a magical notary, she asked. An oversimplification, but essentially, yes. And if I don't sign? Alistair let a hint of his true power leak into his voice. The Fae are beautiful, but they are cruel. A border war would spill into the mortal realm. Villages would burn. Your world would suffer. Mia was quiet for a long moment, looking from the ancient scroll to his face. He saw the calculation in her eyes, the weighing of options. She wasn't scared. She was assessing the situation. It was infuriatingly pragmatic. Fine, she said finally. I'll sign. But I get my exclusive content first. Good faith. Let's start with a day in the life of a vampire king. And so, it began. Alistair found himself being shadowed by a perpetually filming millennial. His morning ritual of meditating in his sarcophagus to connect with the dark earth was interrupted by her asking him to do it again, but with more feeling his solemn review of scout reports from the Shadow Wraiths was narrated by Mia. Okay, so Alistair is meeting with his spooky ghost employees now, she whispered to her phone. Corporate goth vibes. I'm guessing they're discussing quarterly projections for soul reaping. Very high-pressure environment. The wraiths, ethereal beings of pure fear, actually seemed to shrink away from the phone's lens. He took her to the castle library, a place of profound silence and knowledge, containing books bound in human skin and scrolls that could drive a man mad. So many books, Mia breathed, panning her phone across the towering shelves. It's giving Beauty and the Beast, but, you know, with more existential dread. Any first editions? What's the oldest book you have? Alistair, despite himself, felt a flicker of pride. This, he said, levitating a heavy, iron-bound tome from a high shelf. The Codex of Eternal Night. It was written before the rise of man. Wow, Mia said, genuinely impressed. She zoomed in on the cover. Can you open it? No, Alistair said flatly. To read its passages is to invite madness. Cool, cool. So, not exactly beach reading. He found himself explaining things he hadn't spoken of in centuries. The history of his lineage, the delicate political balance he maintained, the nature of his own immortality. She would listen intently, then rephrase it for her audience. So basically, she'd say, turning to her phone, Alistair is like a CEO of a very old, very spooky company. He's got board meetings with other monsters, he's got HR issues with werewolves, and he's got to deal with all this ancient magical paperwork. It's a lot of admin, you guys. Being an immortal king is not as glamorous as it looks. Strangest of all, he started watching her videos. Late at night, in the privacy of his observatory, he would use a captured soul mirror to scry the strange, chaotic world of the internet. He watched her dungeon decor tour and felt a bizarre flush of embarrassment. He watched her edit the day in the live video, marveling at how she could cut his long, menacing monologue down to a 10-second soundbite. And then he read the comments. OMG, he's so dramatic, I love him. The eye roll at 3:15 is my new favorite reaction meme. NGL his kinda hot in a will definitely kill you but might read you poetry first way. Team Alistair. Buddha McBatpants. They weren't afraid of him. They were entertained by him. They saw him not as a creature of ultimate terror, but as a character. A grumpy, theatrical landlord to Mia's chaotic tenant. Through her lens, his terrifying grandeur was reframed as endearing melodrama. His ancient power was just a cool special effect. One afternoon, she found him in the abandoned solarium. It was the one place in the castle the sun had once touched, though the glass was now so thick with grime that only a faint, grey light filtered through. In the center of the room was a single, withered rosebush, its petals black and brittle, clinging to thorny, lifeless stems. He was tending to it, carefully removing a dead leaf with a surprising gentleness. He didn't hear her approach. He was lost in a memory, a flicker of a sunlit garden and a human lifetime so distant it felt like a dream. "Whatcha doing?" He spun around, startled. Mia stood in the doorway, her phone, for once, not recording. "It is none of your concern," he said, his voice harsher than he intended. She walked closer, her eyes on the dead plant. "My grandma used to have roses like this. Well, not black. Or, cursed looking. But she loved them." She looked at him, her usual witty guard down for a moment. Was this, from before? He didn't have to ask what she meant. "It is a relic of a forgotten time." "It's pretty dead," she observed, with her typical lack of tact. "It is not dead," he countered, a strange defensiveness rising in him. "It is merely dormant." He had been tending to it for 500 years. A foolish, sentimental gesture. A link to a life he barely remembered. No one had ever seen him do it. It was a private, shameful vulnerability. Mia was silent. He braced himself for a joke, a sarcastic comment about his goth gardening hobby. Instead, she just nodded slowly. "Okay," she said softly. "Dormant." She didn't film it. She didn't mention it in her next video. She just kept the moment between them. And in that quiet, dusty room, surrounded by the ghosts of sunlight, Alistair felt something shift. The exasperation he constantly felt in her presence was now mingled with a strange, unfamiliar warmth. She was still the most irritating person he had ever met. But she was also the only person in half a millennium who had seen a crack in his armor and hadn't immediately tried to stab him through it. He was still a king, and she was still his pawn. But he was beginning to suspect that the game they were playing was far more complicated than he had ever imagined. And for the first time, he wasn't entirely sure he wanted it to end. The treaty sat on the obsidian table between them, the ancient script practically vibrating with contained power. Mia had her phone propped up, of course, filming the historic moment for a video she'd tentatively titled, "Signing Magical Contracts with My Vampire Landlord, Not Clickbait." "Okay, so just to recap for everyone watching," she said, addressing her phone. "I am about to sign this super old, super important document that will prevent a war between the vampires and the Fae." No pressure or anything. She picked up the blood quill Alistair had provided. "This is a real feather, guys. And yes, that is real ink. Or blood. Or blood ink. BL ink. We'll workshop it." Alistair watched, a complex mixture of emotions swirling within him. Irritation, still, was primary. But beneath it, a grudging admiration and a disquieting fondness. She had held up her end of the bargain. She'd turned his life upside down, demystified his entire existence, and given his Wraith Scouts performance anxiety, but she had agreed to sign. "Just press the tip to your finger," he instructed, his voice flat. "A single drop of blood is all the pact requires to recognize your lineage." Right. Method acting," Mia muttered, looking at the sharp point of the quill with trepidation. She took a deep breath, pricked her thumb, and winced. A perfect, crimson bead welled up. She pressed the quill into it, then carefully, deliberately, signed her name Mia Willow at the bottom of the scroll. The moment the signature was complete, the ink flared with a soft, golden light. The runes on the page glowed, and a faint, musical chime echoed through the room. The magic of the treaty was renewed. "Whoa," Mia breathed, staring at her glowing signature. "Okay, That is way cooler than Doku-sign. Alistair felt the shift in the magical currents of his domain. The tension at the Fey border eased, the ancient wards settling back into a peaceful hum. It was done. His kingdom was safe. He had what he needed. She was free to go. The thought landed in his mind with the cold, heavy finality of a coffin lid. He should be relieved. His sanctum would be his own again. The silence would return. There would be no more requests for Wi-Fi passwords, no more critiques of his decor, no more cheerful narration over his grim and eternal duties. He would be alone, as he had been for centuries. The prospect felt empty. Well, Mia said, breaking the silence. She capped the lens on her phone and slipped it into her pocket. Her usual performative energy seemed to dissipate, leaving a quiet uncertainty in its place. I guess that's a wrap. I will have Bartholomew arrange for your transport back to the mortal world, Alistair said, the words feeling like stones in his mouth. He kept his expression impassive, a mask of regal indifference he had perfected over ages. Cool. Cool, she nodded, not quite meeting his eyes. So, thanks, I guess. For not, draining me like a Capri Sun. It's been an experience. Indeed, was all he could manage. An awkward silence stretched between them, thicker and more uncomfortable than any of the dramatic, terrifying silences he had ever engineered. This one was real. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the castle to its foundations. Dust rained from the vaulted ceiling, and the ancient stones groaned in protest. The glowing treaty on the table flickered and went dark. What was that? Mia yelled over the rumbling. An earthquake. Alistair was already moving, his senses on high alert. This was not a natural event. This was an attack. The wards have been breached, he snarled, his eyes glowing with a dangerous red light. Someone has used blood magic to force an entry. Before Mia could respond, the great doors to the throne room burst inward, ripped from their iron hinges as if they were paper. Standing in the ruined doorway was a figure Alistair knew all too well. Lord Valerus. He was Alistair's contemporary, his oldest and most bitter rival. Where Alistair was all controlled power and gothic melodrama, Valerus was pure, unrestrained brutality. He was taller than Alistair, broader, with a cruel sneer permanently etched onto his face. He wore armor of blackened steel, and in his hand, he held a massive, two-handed sword forged with silver. Alistair, Valerus boomed, his voice like grinding stone. I see you are entertaining. I came to see for myself the source of your newfound weakness. This, chattering mortal pet. His cold, dead eyes fell on Mia, and for the first time since her arrival, she looked genuinely terrified. This was not the theatrical, brooding vampire she had grown accustomed to. This was a monster, raw and undisguised. Valerus, Alistair said, his voice dropping to a deadly low pitch. He stepped in front of Mia, shielding her with his body. You are not welcome in my house. Your house. Valerus laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You have turned this fortress of fear into a stage for this jester. I have seen her ridiculous little pictures in the soul mirrors. You, a king, reduced to a buffoon for the entertainment of cattle. You are a disgrace to our kind. Mia, recovering from her initial shock, did the only thing she knew how to do when faced with a crisis. Her hand went to her pocket, her fingers closing around her phone. It was her shield, her narrator's box, the lens that put a safe distance between her and reality. Heard you were talking smack, she said, her voice trembling only slightly as she held up the phone, its light cutting through the gloom. She was already recording. Say it again for the vlog, you oversized Hot Topic model. Valerus blinked, momentarily thrown by the same baffling behavior that had plagued Alistair. What is this madness? It's called content, sweetie. Look it up, Mia retorted, her bravado a thin shield against the palpable menace rolling off Valerus. Alistair felt a surge of something hot and protective. Leave her out of this, Valerus. Your quarrel is with me. She is the reason for this quarrel. Valerus roared, and then he moved. He was impossibly fast, a blur of black steel and fury. Alistair met his charge, their clash echoing like a thunderclap through the hall. The fight was brutal. Valerus fought with raw strength, His silver-laced sword a deadly threat that forced Alistair onto the defensive. Alistair was more graceful, more precise, a fencer against a butcher, but the sheer ferocity of the attack was overwhelming. Mia stumbled back, phone held high. "Holy crap, guys, it is going down," she narrated, her voice tight with adrenaline. "We are live-streaming a vampire duel. This is gonna break the internet." She was doing it again, processing the terror through her screen. She filmed as Alistair parried a vicious blow that shattered a stone pillar. She captured the snarl on his face as he dodged a swipe that would have decapitated him. Her followers were seeing it all, the raw, deadly reality behind the grumpy landlord persona. The comments on her livestream would have been a torrent of panic and disbelief. But Mia wasn't looking at them. Her eyes were fixed on the fight, her knuckles white where she gripped her phone. Alistair was tiring. The silver in Valerus's blade was weakening him, each block sending a jolt of burning poison through his arms. He saw an opening, a feint, and lunged, his claws aiming for Valerus's throat. But it was a trap. Valerus let the blow land, a shallow gash, and brought the pommel of his sword around in a crushing arc, striking Alistair in the side. Alistair staggered back, a pained grunt escaping his lips. In that moment of weakness, Valerus didn't press his advantage. Instead, his cruel eyes flicked to Mia. He saw his true target. Not the king, but the king's weakness. With a guttural roar, Valerus disengaged from Alistair and charged directly at Mia. Everything seemed to slow down. Alistair saw the sword raised high. He saw the genuine, unadulterated terror on Mia's face, her vlogger persona completely gone. He saw her future snuffed out in a single, brutal instant. He would not allow it. With a surge of strength born from a desperation he hadn't felt in centuries, Alistair threw himself through the air, moving faster than he ever had before. He put himself directly in the path of the descending blade. Mia saw it happen in horrifying slow motion. Alistair appearing in front of her. The flash of silver. The sickening, wet thud as the sword bit deep into his shoulder, carving through flesh and bone. Alistair cried out, a sound of pure agony that was utterly alien from the composed, theatrical king she knew. Black blood, thick and viscous, poured from the wound. He stumbled, his leg buckling, but he remained standing between her and the threat. And in that instant, Mia's world snapped into focus. The phone, her shield, her career, her connection to everything she knew, suddenly felt like a useless, stupid piece of plastic. The 50,000 Myaniacs, the likes, the shares, the algorithm, none of it mattered. The only thing in the entire universe that mattered was the man bleeding in front of her. The phone clattered from her numb fingers, the screen cracking as it hit the stone floor. The livestream ended abruptly, leaving 50,000 people staring at a fractured image of a Gothic ceiling. Mia didn't notice. She didn't care. Her eyes were locked on Valerus, who was grinning triumphantly as he prepared to pull his sword free for another strike. Rage, primal and pure, flooded Mia's system. She looked around wildly, her eyes landing on a heavy, wrought-iron candelabra that had been knocked over in the fight. Without a second thought, she grabbed it. It was heavy, unwieldy, but it was solid. "Hey, discount Dracula," she screamed, her voice raw. Valerus turned, his sneer widening at the sight of the human girl holding a piece of furniture. It was the distraction Alistair needed. As Valerus's attention shifted for a single, fatal second, Alistair acted. Ignoring the searing pain, he grabbed the blade embedded in his shoulder with his bare hand, smoke rising from his flesh where it touched the silver. With a roar that was more beast than man, he ripped the sword from his own body and, in the same motion, plunged it forward, driving the silver-laced steel straight through Valerus's chest. Valerus's eyes went wide with shock. He looked down at the sword protruding from his armor, then up at Alistair. He opened his mouth to speak, but only dust and ashes came out. He crumbled, his armor clattering empty to the floor, his ancient evil existence extinguished in a moment. Silence descended, broken only by Alistair's ragged breathing. He leaned heavily against a pillar, the hand that had held the silver blade burned raw, his shoulder a mangled ruin. He looked at Mia, who was still holding the candelabra like a baseball bat, her chest heaving, her face pale with shock but blazing with a fierce, protective fire he had never seen before. The jokes were gone. The cameras were off. All that was left was the two of them, surrounded by the wreckage, in the sudden, deafening quiet. The adrenaline drained out of Mia as quickly as it had come, leaving her shaking. The heavy candelabra fell from her grasp with a loud clang that echoed in the throne room's profound silence. Her eyes were fixed on Alistair, on the horrifying wound in his shoulder, the black blood staining his fine velvet coat, the scorched skin of his hand. He was hurt. He was hurt protecting her. She ran to him, her sneakers silent on the stone. "Oh my God, Alistair. Are you okay?" "That's a stupid question. Of course you're not okay. You have a giant hole in you." Her words tumbled out, frantic and unedited, stripped of their usual ironic detachment. Alistair looked down at his wound as if just noticing the severity of it. "The silver, it burns," he rasped, his voice strained with pain. He tried to straighten up, to regain some semblance of his regal posture, but a wave of dizziness sent him stumbling against the pillar again. "Sit down," Mia ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. She guided him to the floor, her hands hovering uncertainly over his wound, afraid to touch it. "What do I do? Is there, like, a vampire first aid kit? Do you need a blood bag? A doctor?" Alistair managed a weak, pained smile. "My physician has been dead for 400 years. And my healing abilities are suppressed by the silver." He looked at her, his usual guarded expression gone, replaced by a raw, open vulnerability. "You dropped your rectangle." It was such an absurd thing to say in that moment that Mia almost laughed, but it came out as a sob. "It's a phone. And it doesn't matter." She looked at the cracked screen lying a few feet away. It looked like a relic from another life. "You were hurt. That's all that mattered." "Why?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why did you not simply continue to record? It would have been your greatest content." Tears welled in Mia's eyes. "Because you're not content, you idiot," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're a person. A grumpy, overly dramatic, cape-wearing person. And that asshole was going to kill you." She finally found her courage and pressed a piece of her torn sleeve against the wound, trying to staunch the bleeding. Alistair hissed in pain but didn't pull away. He stared at her, his crimson eyes searching her face. For 800 years, he had been a symbol, a predator, a king, a monster. To his enemies, he was a target. To his subjects, a figure of awe and fear. To the world, a myth. He had ceased to be a person so long ago he could barely remember what it felt like. Until her. She had arrived and refused to see the myth. She'd seen the man underneath and found him ridiculous, endearing, worthy of being teased, worthy of being filmed, and now, apparently, worthy of being saved. "In all my years," he said, his voice gaining a fraction of its strength, fueled by a dawning, overwhelming realization. "No one has ever looked at me and seen anything but a king or a monster. They fear the power or they covet the throne. They never see me." He reached up with his uninjured hand, his fingers gently tracing her jawline. His touch was cold, but it sent a shock of warmth through her. You saw an awkward, lonely man who tends a dead rosebush. You saw me." Mia's own defenses crumbled completely. Her sarcasm was a shield, a way to keep the world at arm's length, to turn fear and uncertainty into a performance. But there was no performance now. "My whole life is a performance, Alistair," she confessed, her voice choked. "If I'm filming, I'm in control. I'm the narrator. Nothing can really hurt me if I'm turning it into a story for other people." She met his intense gaze. "When he came at you, the story stopped. And it was real. And all I could think was that I couldn't lose you. The emotional climax, the real one, wasn't the fight. It was this. The quiet moment in the wreckage when the jokes finally stopped. I brought you here to be a pawn," Alistair murmured, his thumb stroking her cheek. "A means to an end. A key. But you have become the lock, the door, and the entire kingdom." He took a ragged breath. "I believe the mortal term for this feeling is love." Mia's breath hitched. She had flirted with the idea, joked about it to her followers, but hearing him say it, with such raw, painful sincerity, was overwhelming. Yeah, she whispered, a real, watery smile gracing her lips for the first time. Me too, you big, brooding idiot. I love you too. He smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his severe face into something devastatingly handsome. Then it seems my plans have gone wonderfully awry. A rasping sound from the doorway made them both look up. Bartholomew stood there, his skeletal frame trembling as he took in the scene of destruction. He saw the empty armor of Lord Valerus, his master bleeding on the floor, and the mortal girl tending to him. My lord, he cried, rushing forward. Bartholomew, Alistair said, his voice regaining a sliver of its command. Fetch the ashes of the phoenix from the reliquary. My wound needs cleansing of the silver. At once, my lord. The ghoul scurried away. Alistair looked back at Mia. It will heal. I am not so easily dispatched. Good, she said firmly. Because you and I have a kingdom to run. And your social media presence is abysmal. We have work to do. He blinked, the familiar sense of bafflement a comforting return to normalcy. Social media presence. Duh, Mia said, her old spark returning. You're a king. You need a brand. We need to engage with your subjects. Do Q&As. Maybe a TikTok dance challenge, but we'll start slow. Alistair looked from his grievous wound to her earnest, glowing face, and he laughed. It was a real, deep, rumbling laugh that echoed through the throne room, chasing away the last of the shadows. It was the sound of a man who had been alone in the dark for 800 years finally finding a light. A weird, ridiculously bright, phone-shaped light. 6 months later, the Crimson Court was a very different place. The spectral torches still cast an eerie glow, but now they were supplemented by strategically placed softbox lights. The mournful howls of the wolves had been replaced by the upbeat, royalty-free music Mia insisted on using for her video intros. Alistair sat on his throne, no longer the throne of eternal sorrow but now just the throne Mia had insisted the old name was a bit of a downer. He was wearing his traditional black velvet, but the cut was slightly more modern, and he felt conspicuously well lit. Mia stood beside a camera mounted on a tripod, a script in her hand. Okay, from the top, honey, she said, her voice echoing with cheerful authority. Remember what we talked about. You're not just a monarch of eternal night, you're an influencer. You have to be relatable. Alistair sighed. Mia, my love, I am an 800-year-old vampire. The very concept of relatable is alien to me. Nonsense, she chirped. You brood. People love brooding. You like old books. That's #book talk gold. You have a pet ghoul. We can spin that into a whole unlikely friendships series. Now, ready? 3, 2, 1. She pointed at him. Alistair looked into the camera lens, the tiny, unblinking eye that he had once viewed with such suspicion and now regarded as a necessary evil, like daylight or werewolves. Greetings, subjects and subscribers, he began, the last word still feeling awkward. I am Alistair, your king. I come to you today to address the recent agricultural reforms in the lower fiefdoms. Cut. Mia yelled. Too stiff. Less decree from on high, more fireside chat and for God's sake, smile a little. Show the fangs. The subscribers love the fangs. He shot her an exasperated look, the very one that had become a beloved meme across the internet. But there was no heat in it. He rolled his eyes, but then a small, genuine smile touched his lips, the sharp points of his canines peeking out. Is this acceptable, my queen? Perfect, she beamed. You're a natural. Their royal vlog, Ruling the Night, had become a viral sensation. They had millions of followers. Mia had successfully rebranded his entire kingdom. The Shadow Wraiths now ran the official merch store, t-shirts that read Live, Laugh, Lurk. Bartholomew had his own popular segment called Barty's Corner, where he gave stoic, centuries-old advice on modern problems. The kingdom's tourism had skyrocketed, though the tourists were mostly goths and paranormal investigators. It was chaotic. It was undignified. It was utterly baffling. And Alistair had never been happier. Later that evening, after the filming was done, he found her in the solarium. The grimy panes of glass had been cleaned, and moonlight streamed in, illuminating the room in a soft, silver glow. In the center, the ancient rosebush was showing the first, tentative signs of new life, a single, tiny green leaf unfurling on one of the black stems. Mia was standing beside it, her phone in her hand, but she wasn't recording. She was just looking at the new leaf. Alistair came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. She leaned into his embrace, her head resting on his shoulder. "I told you it was merely dormant," he murmured into her hair. "You did," she said softly. "I guess some things just need a little light to grow again." He rested his chin on her head, content. The world outside was loud and bright and confusing. But here, in the quiet heart of his castle, with his impossible, ridiculous, brilliant queen in his arms, everything finally made sense. He was still a king. He was still a creature of the night. But he was no longer just a monster in the dark. He was Alistair. And for the first time in a very, very long time, he was home. Mia tilted her head up to kiss him, then pulled back with a mischievous glint in her eye. "You know, this would make a great Instagram post. The symbolic rebirth of the cursed rosebush? The metaphor is killer." Alistair sighed, a long, theatrical sound of pure, unadulterated exasperation. But as he leaned in to kiss her again, he was smiling. The baffled king had finally found his chaotic queen, and their reign was just getting started.